Welcome back to Spider-Man Dissembled. This is Michael T. Bradley.
And this is Jason Freston. Welcome back.
I thought something kind of fun to do as a starter here would be to say to whom we're looking forward the most out of the Brain Trust. Bob Gale, Dan Slott, Zeb Wells, and Mark Guggenheim. If any of you listen to Jason's and my podcast Acts of Treason, you know that neither of us are that fond of Guggenheim in general, although Jason said his Flash stuff wasn't bad. So he's probably the bottom of my list.
Okay, as a quick note, Guggenheim's Flash run wasn't amazing. It was alright. It ended really bad, but it was a very editorially mandated series, so that's in his defense, but alright, yeah.
Gale, I only vaguely remember from, obviously, Back to the Future, but doing some No Man's Land work, and I don't remember it being good or bad, but I like No Man's Land overall, so I'll say that he's second up. Then Dan Slott, I remember really enjoying back in the Ren and Stimpy days. He always seems to be able to do comedy. I think he'll be a perfect fit on Spider-Man. I'm excited about him, but Zeb Wells, I absolutely know for sure. I have always loved his Spider-Man stuff. So that's my order of excitement from least to most.
The order of the people I'm looking forward to is very similar to Michael's, going from worst to best, is Guggenheim. I'm still not a huge fan of his. Bob Gale, which I really did like his stuff on the Batman No Man's Land stuff, so that's good. Wells is next on my list. This is where I deviate from Michael. You know, it's just most of the stuff I've read by Wells I've enjoyed, but I usually have to look up to see what he's written, you know? So I'm not like, yay Webb, or yay Wells. I'm just like, I know I've liked his stuff. What did he write again? And meanwhile, Dan Slott, loved his She-Hulk run. Slott's really good at taking things that I don't think I should like and making me like them, which is very important for this new Spider-Man run, I think, since I want to like it, but I don't know if I will, so it's all on you, Dan. It's all on you.
So first, let's look at Spider-Man Swing Shift by Dan Slott and Phil Jimenez, not sure how that's pronounced. This was for Free Comic Book Day 2007. Not sure if this was the first thing to come out or not. It seems weird if it was that they really did start the relaunch with this, but definitely continuity-wise, it looks like it's supposed to fall there. So I'm going to go over like a basic sort of plot premise. More than plot, I'm just going to talk about mostly what's introduced in these things. If I try to go over plot, I'll probably just get too intertwined in the intricacies. Not really interested in that, looking at the bigger picture here. So Swing Shift, the entire plot of it is Peter's taking a cake to his Aunt May, and he's all excited. He's like, yeah, I'm finally going to show her how awesome I am, because the Superhero Registration Act has made it so that the streets are safer. You know, I don't have to be Spider-Man all the time and patrolling and blah, 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 so I'm going to make it up to her. And so, of course, a supervillain comes by and ruins his day, etc., etc., etc. The supervillain is Overdrive. We're going to see him again later. The twist there is that he's a big fan of Spider-Man. We get the introduction of the Bar with No Name, a bar where supervillains hang out, and there's a guy who takes bets on things. We get the introduction of Jackpot, and she says Tiger for the first time. Jackpot, a mysterious redhead who calls Peter Tiger, but she's a superhero. They keep pounding home this idea that Spider-Man's webbing only lasts 1 hour, and that it has to last an hour. I remember this in the olden days, but I thought he had changed the formula at some point. Of course, I also thought he got organic web shooters at some point, but that's silly. We're ignoring all of that, remember?
So for that matter, Peter had also installed these little LED lights on his web shooters years and years ago that flashed whenever he was running out of webbing, so he would never run out of get caught running out of webbing in the middle of something. He'd know about it. Science!
And we get the introduction of the two cops. I think they're Vin and Pallone. One of them hates Spider-Man, and one of them loves him, or at least tolerates him and thinks he's a good thing for the city. They're going to be pretty much the only cops we see in all of New York for most of the Brand New Day stuff, at least for a while.
Okay, so Vin seemingly goes from black in this little Free Comic Book Day series to white the next time we see him in the actual AMS stuff. So I wonder if there's a no prize there somewhere, or is it the chameleon?
So those are the sort of basic bare bones of what we get. So how does this interact with the rest of the Marvel Universe? Well, they mentioned the Registration Act, which I think is a really nice touch, but it is kind of murky. I mean, the problem with mentioning the Registration Act is it brings up Civil War. The problem with bringing up Civil War is what the hell happened? Spider-Man unmasked in front of the entire country. We know at this point that nobody knows who Spider-Man is, but we don't know why that is. And at this point, I think the mystery is okay. I think the mystery is fun and intriguing, and you want to find out what's up with that. But I think it's a difficult balancing act to throw that out there and not at least give some hint right off the bat if you're mentioning the Registration Act, like, ooh, I dodged a bullet there. Something along those lines, I think is damn near necessary from step one. I think you can pull back from it later, but I think you need something like that immediately, and we don't have that. I did, however, feel overall that staying a mystery for now did work. The only real continuity we have within the storyline itself is artwork continuity, because, God, I would hope that this one little, like, 8-page issue or whatever it is would have decent continuity within itself. And I just wanted to say that Jimenez is, like, the god among artists. He does like, this incredible thing with the rip in Peter's Spidey mask, and it stays in the same place throughout the panels, and just everything looks gorgeous, because Phil is incredible.
Yeah, Jimenez rocks. Like, seriously, I totally love his stuff. So that's awesome he was there for this.
We get to see J. Jonah Jameson. He's the same old, same old. You know, I think a large part of the point of this swing shift issue is just essentially to reintroduce the characters and say, look, you know, this is where everything stands. We get Betty Brant, which is awesome. I always really liked Betty Brant, thought she was one of the most interesting characters in the classic stuff, and really want her to be used more, so I'm glad that she got, like, a whole half page of screen time.
Yeah, I am very happy that Betty is back also. She was one of my favorite supporting cast characters back in the old days. One of the problems I had with her then is she was another one of these people that's like, gee, I love Peter, but I hate Spider-Man. Grr, down with Spider-Man. Which is just a trope that they played out so much all the time, to my recollection in the old Spider-Man stuff, that I just didn't care anymore. It was just like, really? Really? But hopefully they don't go this direction with her this time, so we'll see how that goes.
Aunt May kind of hates Peter now, which I think is kind of an interesting route to go. It's like, serves you right, you dick. But it's not in a horrible way, and again, trying not to think about one more day at all here. So it's just, it seems as if they're trying to use Aunt May in a way that's not exactly the same as you've seen her before, but giving her some screen time. I think it's stupid. For me, Aunt May died back in issue 400. She's been dead since then, and Peter is haunted by her ghost. Before we get into the first full story proper, let's talk a little bit about the Brevoort Manifesto that I mentioned before, and we're just going to bring up bits and pieces here and there. A couple of them that he talks about is Peter is the hard luck hero. He says at some point we got afraid of making fun of our heroes or having things happen at their expense, and he gives a few examples from the 60s and early 70s. And on that same theme, he talks about how Peter can make bad choices, that Peter isn't necessarily a hero, he acts heroic in spite of himself, and again, he gives choices.
All right, a couple of things on Brevoort's manifesto from me here. All right, so the first thing is just a stupid little semantic argument for me, because I really think that being a hero and acting heroic despite of yourself is just that. It's just semantics, you know? I don't really think very many people are like, I'm going to be a hero. It's like, oh my god, I'm in this situation, I'm scared to death, but you know what? I gotta step up and do something, and you do it despite yourself. So, I mean, it just seems silly to be like, Peter's not a hero, he's just a hero despite himself. Now, if he was off running around being like, ooh, I'm gonna go rob a bank, and then through a series of, like, a comedy of errors ends up stopping a bank robbery, then that would be being a hero despite yourself, you know? And that totally doesn't seem to be the type of thing that Tom's talking about, but yeah, whatever. Like I said, that's just a semantic thing for me.
I'll get into my problems with that in a second. First, let's get into Brevoort's apparent own problems with that. One of his dictums is, go forward. Don't pretend it's 1968 still, because it's not. Do your own stories, do your own thing with characters, and move forward. Well, I think part of moving forward that they've done over the past 40 years is the simple fact that, you know what, all these things that kind of happened to Peter before, like, you know, he shrinks his costume, and he does this, and all these other things happen at his own expense, he's learned from them. So to keep trying to do stuff like, oh, I forgot to refill my web fluid, just seems stupid. It's like, that's why it wasn't brought up through the 90s. It wasn't because we got afraid to make fun of our hero. It was because Peter started learning, you know? I mean, he didn't make the same mistakes twice, and after a while, he had made most of the mistakes that are going to happen while he's Spider-Man. So I think Brevoort's, like, misunderstanding a fundamental idea about the character growing and changing. And on the same token, him making bad choices. It's like, you know, doing selfish things and paying for it. He's done it so many times now that, again, like I got into last time, it seems like he's more driven by guilt than anything else these days. So to say that he might want to do something for selfish reasons for more than a half second just seems, again, like you're trying to have your cake and eat it too. Go forward, don't let it be 1968, but kind of sort of pretend it's 1968 when it comes to the characters. That doesn't float in my boat. And I think it's the sort of fundamental frustration that you have with any sort of ongoing character who is also a licensed trademark. One of his other things that he brings up in that manifesto is that Spider-Man 2 got it right. Like, Spider-Man 2 approached the character exactly right, and it hit all the right notes. Well, I love Spider-Man 2, but one of the reasons why it hit all the right notes and did everything right is because it's early on in Peter's career. That's where he is at that point of being Spider-Man, like screwing up and having these little like mishaps with closets that take up 4 minutes of screen time. That scene could have been the entire film as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, so one of the problems that I have with this manifesto is that they want Spidey to be this vet. You know, he has this rogue gallery, and he's got this history, you know, this deep history with stuff, but at the same time, he keeps making all of these rookie mistakes, which just doesn't ring true to me. Spidey has been active in a hero right now for anywhere between 9 to 11 years, depending on how you want to look at it. He won't make stupid little rookie mistakes like running out of web fluid anymore. He put an LED light back in the 80s in his web shooters, for heaven's sakes, you know, and they've totally ignored that since then because, like Michael said, they stopped having him run out of web fluid in the 90s because it was just overdone and silly. Anyway, but they believe that focusing on stuff like that makes him like a everyman hero, but instead it just kind of makes him clown shoes. It's like, holy crap, I've been doing this for, you know, let's be nice here and say 9. Doing this for 9 years, and I forgot my web fluid, you know, to refill it again, or I forgot it only lasts for an hour. I'm gonna miss Aunt May's party, he. You know, it just makes them seem really silly. Instead, what I think they should be focusing more on is the Parker luck. You know, just bad things happen to him at inopportune times and through really no fault of his own, which is something I think we can all be a little bit more like, that's happened to me. You know, I've missed that bus because it came early. I was on time, but it was early. Or just silly little things like that you didn't cause but just happened to you. I think that makes him more accessible as a character than all of these silly mistakes. You know, it'd be like you working your job being a coder and being like, oh, I forgot to save my code. I've only been doing this for 10 years. Yeah, silly me, you know? I mean, it's dumb.
Also, some of the things they do in Spider-Man 2 is him unmasking, because it makes sense for him to unmask when everybody around him's life is being put into danger. Yet now it's like, oh, nobody knows who he is, etc., etc., etc. I mean, it's like, you know, he's picking and choosing the parts that he wants. The things that I like about Spider-Man 2, I think are probably not the things that he likes about Spider-Man 2. And it's like, Spider-Man 2 did both of them. They did the things that Braveheart or somebody like him likes because they have to, because Peter is still like 17 in that movie, still young and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. But it's also right for a variety of reasons that I like, because some of the things just make more sense.
By the way, Michael, Peter's probably somewhere between 20 and 22 in Spider-Man 2, not 17, just saying, because, you know, he was in college, but anyway, I digress.
Let's now head on into the first three-parter, 546 to 548. Amazing, of course. This is, I think, all amazing. I don't think they've started up another offshoot title, unless you count, like, Venom or whatever, since then. Dan Slott and Steve McNiven. Steve McNiven, of course, very popular for his work on Civil War. We have a ton of stuff introduced here. I'm just going to go through the list. We have the Spider Mugger, a guy who wears a Spider-Man mask and mugs people. The mayoral race, which becomes a huge subplot, is introduced.
I really like the mayoral subplot. That's kind of something different. I haven't seen that in a Spider-Man book before, so I'm very curious to see where that goes.
Harry and his girlfriend are there, introducing the fact that, you know, Harry Osborn is back. Some of these things were introduced in the last, like, 3 pages or whatever of One More Day, but I figured since we're basically ignoring One More Day, we're gonna ignore that too. It doesn't really add anything except, yeah, the marriage is over and Harry's back, and we're gonna bring that up anyway. There's this Mia chick who wants Pete in order to be close to Harry. We get Charlie the forensic chick, who's like either Harry or Harry's girlfriend's roommate. She's a forensic chick. We see Mr. Negative, the bad guy who's after a tablet of some sort. We get introduced to the fact that Aunt May works at Feast, which is like a homeless shelter place, a soup kitchen.
All right, is it just me, or is Feast a creepy name for a homeless shelter? Like, seriously, every time I see them, you say, like, I'm going to Feast, I just cannot help but yell in my head, Soylent Green is people!
We see J. Jonah Jameson have his heart attack, which leads to the DB getting sold to Dexter Bennett. We get the introduction of Harry owning a Starbucks, which is very Smallville. He feels very Lex in Smallville to me now. And kind of the overall plot here, boy, there are like 3 juggling at the same time. The J. Jonah Jameson and the sale of the Bugle. The Spider Mugger actually mugs Peter, and he gets one of his web shooters, and blah, 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 blah. And Mr. Negative is making a blood virus to kill off mafia families. I refuse to say Magia or Magi or however the hell you're saying. It's the mafia, whatever. In the end, we see Mr. Negative get Spidey's blood, and we see that the mafia is like, we owe you, Spider-Man, because you saved our children. We get the introduction at the very end of the Spider Tracer Killer, and the reveal that Mr. Negative is in fact the guy who runs Feast, Mr. Lee. And Vin and Pallone are played up some more. Overall, I thought this was clever. Very, very clever. Slott wrote a very clever introductory story. It's not funny at any point, which is kind of sad, but it's very, very clever. For instance, having in the end, the Mafia is like, you know, Spider-Man, we really like you, and we're gonna, like, we got your back from now on. When kind of the entire point of the story is about how much it sucks to be Spider-Man and how he has no friends and da-da-da-da-da-da. Having it be like the Mafia who in the end is like, we're your friends, and it's like, I don't really want these friends. I thought was a nice touch. I thought that was very clever. Again, not funny, but very clever. The fact that every issue starts out with Peter essentially kissing someone, I thought was a nice little visual gag that, again, very clever, not funny. Not saying clever is bad, just saying it feels like it was desperately trying to be funny a lot of times, and it just wasn't.
I agree with Michael. There's really no tee-hee-hee moments in this. There's not anything really funny, which, as Brevoort says in his manifesto, it should be. Spidey should be funny. And there really isn't anything funny, per se, in this, but I mean, it wasn't bad. I was a little disappointed by that from Slott, because Slott usually does some kind of funny stuff, I think, but he did some fun stuff, and so I guess that's close enough.
Oh, we also, again, get the mention of the marriage not being around. We have Harry says something about, don't mention models around Peter, he almost got married to one. Which, again, if you're reading it like I am, like this continues from the annual 2001, still works. I mean, it's like, Harry's Peter's best friend, so maybe he just, you know, he's like, hey, Harry, when we're out in public, can you just not mention that I was actually married? And we'll just say I almost got married, blah, 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 blah. The scene where Peter's looking for a job, both in the newspaper and going around to jobs, I think makes him look pathetic, not an everyman, which is obviously what they were going for. I think a more everyman approach would be Peter holding down some sort of job that he doesn't necessarily like that whole 6th season Buffy, her working at fast food. Whereas him, like, not even able to get a job just feels really pathetic, and it's like, God, man, like, failure to launch is one thing, but, like, at this point he's, what, 28? And he's still having these sort of problems? I mean, you know, I'm not saying I want him to be Tony Stark's aide-de-camp again, necessarily, though that was awesome and made total sense at the time. But him just being, like, a no-good loser still really makes it feel like, God, it's tough to like this character.
I think a better approach to the job hunting thing would have been to cite the economy. I mean, Marvel loves being all timely and topical, and that, again, just seems way more everyman to me than, you know, the series of events that he goes through in the book. You know, it's just like, well, Peter, we'd like to hire you, but with the economy, we're already laying off people. Sorry, man. Come talk to us in an indeterminate amount of time.
I'm going to try to point out, like I did with the last bit, talking about how Jackpot is obviously being teased to possibly be Mary Jane. We also get teases of Harry being Mephisto or being created by Mephisto or something. In here, Peter answers the phone and it's Harry and he says, speak of the devil. I don't know if anybody caught any others. I'll admit I actually read these first few trades about 2 months ago, so I'm kind of just going through, flipping through it and remembering it and talking about the overall themes. I think that's about all I have to say on these sections. Overall, I'm not really excited or depressed so far. There's nothing that makes me hate what's going on, but there's nothing so far that really makes me intrigued.
So I enjoyed it overall more than I expected to, which was nice.
I like Jackpot. I'll admit, I really like Jackpot.
I like Jackpot as a character, like, as a concept, you know, of, like, this new character that's superhero and whatnot, but I totally hate the is she MJ stuff, because she obviously isn't, and anytime they try to force it with her being like Tiger or whatever crap she does in this, just seems really forced and really ham-fisted and really bad, but that's just me, so...
And I think Charlie shows potential.
Most of the supporting cast, I'm new supporting cast members, I'm just really, really lukewarm on. Mostly because I just haven't really, you know, I mean, they haven't had time to do anything yet. So I'm just kind of like, it's Carly and people, you know.
Everything surrounding Harry really, I think, shows potential. We're not really doing much with it yet, but it definitely shows potential.
Harry, I was a little bit surprised by how much I kind of liked Harry. I've never been like a huge... most of my experience with Spider-Man stuff is like late 80s or late 90s. Was when I really started getting into it. So at that point in time, Harry was married and had a kid and, you know, was the Goblin and kind of serious. And so I've not really read much stuff with just Harry and Peter palling around, and I liked it. So that was really nice for me. I'm like, I really liked their kind of buddy-buddy-ish stuff going on.
And I did enjoy the kind of twist at the end with the Mafia being Peter's friend, so I hope something more is done with that. Those are the things that interest me at this point.
Right, this is Jason Freston. Until next time.
For now, this is Michael T. Bradley, and you've been listening to Spider-Man Dissembled.